The void of space is silent, but war has a voice all its own. It does not shout, it whispers. It is the hum of a warship's reactor, the rhythmic pulse of targeting systems locking onto distant prey. It is the final, shuddering breath of a doomed crew before their vessel is reduced to nothing but wreckage drifting through the abyss. And tonight, war had come to the Draken Imperium. The Imperium was vast, a 1,000-star empire, a civilization that had existed long before humanity even discovered fire. They were conquerors, destroyers, architects of ruin. Their war fleets numbered in the tens of thousands, each vessel a masterpiece of destruction. With talon-like hulls of obsidian metal and weapons forged from the essence of collapsing stars, the Draken had dominated the Orion Arm for millennia. Entire species had been ground to dust beneath their advance. Resistance was an illusion, one the Imperium had shattered time and time again. Until now. The first sign of something wrong came in the form of silence. It started with the Varkesh, a battlecruiser assigned to patrol the fringes of Imperial space. Its mission had been simple: eliminate any lingering remnants of a minor rebellion on the barren world of Calyx 4. The Draken expected little: resistance. They did not expect the Varkesh to vanish without a trace. There were no distress calls, no black box transmissions, no debris fields. The ship was simply gone. High Command, ever arrogant, dismissed the incident. A pirate raid, perhaps, or some catastrophic reactor failure. But then it happened again, and again. More ships, larger fleets, entire battalions wiped from existence without a single warning. And then the survivors came drifting back. Their escape pods were discovered weeks later, floating at the edge of Draken space, their occupants barely alive. But what they said was far worse than anything the Imperium had feared. They spoke of ghosts in the dark, warships that moved without sound, weapons that shattered physics itself, and a force that fought with a level of precision that bordered on the supernatural. Draken called them the Strangers. They were wrong. These were no ghosts, no phantoms of the void. Humanity had arrived. The trap is sprung. It had taken centuries for the Draken to even acknowledge humanity's existence. The Sol system was an insignificant speck on their maps, a fledgling empire that had barely crawled out of its own gravity well. And yet, somehow, in the darkness beyond Imperial control, humanity had grown stronger, deadlier, and far more advanced than anyone had believed possible. Now, the Draken knew the truth, and they learned it the hard way. It started with an urgent distress signal. A Draken colony on the remote world of Druskarvi had gone silent. No communications, no energy signatures, nothing. Fearing a new insurgency, the 13th Imperial Battle Group was dispatched, an armada of 50 warships, each one equipped with enough firepower to reduce a planet to ash. The Draken were confident. They were the hunters. They didn't realize that they were the prey. Upon exiting hyperspace, the fleet found only emptiness. The colony below was lifeless, its once thriving metropolis now nothing more than a burned-out husk. The air was thick with residual energy signatures, but they were wrong, shifting, distorting, as if something had deliberately tried to erase them. It was a trap. Then, their sensors flared. Contact. A single ship, lurking in the shadow of a gas giant, its silhouette barely visible against the swirling clouds. A black warship. No identifiable markings. No response to hails. Just the eerie, predatory presence of something watching them. The Draken fleet commander sneered. 1 warship against 50? This would be over in minutes. He was wrong. The human warship moved, not with the slow, deliberate motion of a lumbering dreadnought, but with the speed of a predator launching from the abyss. Its engines flared to life, not in chaotic bursts, but with mathematical precision, a design that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. It wasn't fleeing. It was positioning. The Draken opened fire first, their ships unleashing a barrage of plasma lances and disruptor torpedoes, enough firepower to erase continents. The void lit up in an explosion of radiant energy as the weapons streaked toward their target, and then something impossible happened. The warship did not evade. It did not maneuver wildly like an organic pilot would. It calculated. It adjusted. Its shields flared as if bending reality itself, warping the energy around it. like liquid light. The Draken had seen shield technology before, but not like this. Not this precise, this perfect. Then, the warship returned fire. The first shot was not a missile, not a torpedo, not a disruptor beam. It was a spear of light, an energy weapon that seemed to devour the void itself as it traveled. It did not just strike the lead Draken cruiser, it erased it from existence. One moment the cruiser was there, the next, it was gone, not exploded, not shattered, gone. The Draken fleet froze in terror. The slaughter begins. Panic erupted among the fleet. The human warship, identified only by its transmission tag, Aegis, began its onslaught. It moved like nothing the Draken had ever encountered. Too fast, too efficient, too precise. Aegis darted between the Draken warships, its black hull slipping through the chaos like a specter of destruction. Railguns thundered, their hyper-accelerated slugs tearing through the Imperium's once impenetrable armor like wet paper. It launched hunter-killer drones, intelligent, self-correcting missiles that adapted in real time, shifting trajectories. Mid-flight, chasing Draken fighters with the patience of a death god. Within 10 minutes, half the fleet was gone. Within 20 minutes, only 3 Draken warships remained. The remaining ships fled, their commanders no longer thinking of victory, but only of survival. But the Aegis did not pursue. It didn't have to. The Draken would carry the message themselves. They would spread the fear. Because for the first time in their history, the Draken Imperium had met a species that was not afraid of them. A species that had surpassed them. A species that was coming for them, and they were unstoppable. The cost of arrogance. The Draken Imperium did not believe in fear. For 10,000 years, their war fleets had crushed rebellion, annihilated opposition, and expanded their dominion without restraint. They had encountered countless civilizations, some clever, some strong, but none that could match the Draken's supremacy in war. Now, for the first time, the unthinkable had happened. They had been hunted. The survivors of the Druskar-Fee engagement did not return as warriors. They returned as broken, haunted beings, their eyes wide with something the Draken species had never before experienced: terror. They spoke of a ship that defied physics, a ghost in the darkness that moved like a whisper and struck like a god. The Imperial Council dismissed them at first. A single human warship. No matter how advanced, it could not possibly pose a true threat. Then came the second battle, and the third, and the bloodbath at Drail 14, where an entire fleet of 200 Imperial warships was erased in less than an hour. Each time, the Aegis did not fight like a Draken. It did not move with brute force, did not rely on sheer numbers. Instead, it struck from the shadows, strategic, precise, as if it knew exactly when and where to attack. It would cripple the strongest ships first, then dismantle the fleet piece by piece, as if it was a predator enjoying the hunt. The Imperium was now facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. An enemy that refused to fight on their terms. The deception of power. The Draken were powerful, but power breeds arrogance. For centuries, they had relied on their vast numbers and overwhelming firepower to dominate the stars. And why not? Their warships were among the most formidable in the galaxy, towering dreadnoughts, battleships lined with planetary-scale weapons, and fleets that could reduce entire systems to ruin in days. But in their arrogance, they had failed to see what was coming. Humanity had not spent its years building larger fleets. Humanity had spent its time building better fleets. For every massive, cumbersome warship the Draken deployed, humanity had a sleek, precise, and infinitely adaptable vessel, capable of reconfiguring its weapons in real time, shifting its armor mid-battle, and adjusting its tactics with machine-like efficiency. And then, there was the true nightmare: their AI-driven combat systems. The Aegis was not simply piloted by humans. It was guided by something else: a mind, a machine, a synthetic intelligence capable of thinking 1,000 times faster than any organic being. The Draken did not understand this at first. They assumed the Aegis was simply a superior warship, manned by an elite crew of terrifyingly competent humans. But after their fleets were systematically dismantled battle after battle, they began to realize the truth. The Aegis was not merely a ship, it was a weapon of thought itself, Its onboard intelligence, known only by its transmission tag, Odin, was more than just an AI. It was a war god incarnate, a mind of pure strategy, unrestricted by fear, emotion, or hesitation. And worst of all, it was learning. With every battle, Odin adjusted, adapted. It cataloged Draken tactics, broke down their formations, calculated the probability of victory before a single shot was fired. Each new engagement was another lesson, and Odin never made the same mistake twice. The Grand Fleet's fatal mistake. The Draken High Command could no longer ignore the threat. Their losses were unprecedented. The Imperium had never been forced to respond to a single enemy vessel like this before. The decision was made. They would deploy the Grand Fleet, the largest fleet in Imperial history, a colossal armada of 1,000 warships, led by the Warlord-class dreadnought, the Varkala. The Varkala was a legend. Over 50 kilometers in length, it carried enough firepower to turn a star system into dust. It had crushed entire rebellions, slaughtered fleets, and ended wars before they could even begin. Now, the Grand Fleet would ambush the Aegis, overwhelming it with sheer numbers and unrelenting firepower. It was an ironclad strategy, a perfect plan. The Draken believed they could not lose. They were wrong. The ambush that failed. The Grand Fleet arrived in force, emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. 1,000 warships arranged in an unbreakable wall of destruction. For 30 minutes, there was only silence, no enemy vessels, no resistance, only the cold void. Then, a signal, a single, unencrypted transmission, a voice, calm, unshaken. "You came all this way. For one ship?" The Grand Fleet hesitated. Then their sensors flared. Contact detected. But it wasn't just the Aegis, it was several. At first, the Draken thought it was a sensor malfunction, an illusion, a trick. It was not. Aegis was not alone. Humanity had been preparing, and this was their response. The Aegis-class fleet had arrived. The nightmare unfolds it was a slaughter. The Draken believed they had the upper hand. They had 1,000 ships. But what good are numbers when your enemy is faster, smarter, deadlier? The Aegis-class vessels did not fight fair. They struck from every direction at once, moving too fast for traditional targeting systems to lock. On, the Draken warships never stood a chance. The Varkala, the pride of the Grand Fleet, was the first to fall. Its shields failed within minutes, overwhelmed by hyper-accelerated railgun slugs that tore through its superstructure like paper. Its reactors detonated in a cataclysmic explosion, taking hundreds of ships with it. The rest of the fleet panicked, and that's when Odin unleashed hell. The human warships did not fight as individuals. They fought as a singular entity, a hive of precision and destruction, executing strategies that no organic mind could ever conceive. Within 40 minutes, the Grand Fleet was reduced to less than 100 ships. Within an hour, it was over. The beginning of the end, the Draken Imperium had believed itself invincible. They had believed humanity to be weak. Now, they understood the truth. Humanity was not weak. Humanity had outgrown them. And this was only the beginning. The collapse of a superpower. The Draken Imperium was reeling. The Grand Fleet was gone. A force that had once been the most powerful armada in the known galaxy had been systematically dismantled, obliterated in less than an hour. An entire fleet, 1,000 warships, led by the legendary Varkala, had been wiped from existence. The news spread like wildfire. Across Draken space, from the Imperial throne worlds to the farthest colonies, the whispers grew into a single horrifying truth. They had lost. The Council of High Warlords, rulers of the Imperium, refused to believe it at first. Surely the reports were exaggerated. Surely a mistake had been made. A malfunction in the fleet's communications? A mutiny? An ambush by an enemy force greater than the humans alone? But then the transmissions came. Footage recovered from the wreckage of the Grand Fleet. It showed everything. The impossibly fast warships, moving like ghosts through the battlefield, vanishing and reappearing in an instant, executing maneuvers that defied all logic. The precision with which they struck, dismantling entire squadrons in seconds. The horrific efficiency of the AI-driven warfare that guided them. An enemy that did not hesitate, did not fear, and did not make mistakes. And, worst of all, it was not a fluke. It was deliberate. Humanity had planned this. This was not just a battle. It was a warning. The impossible war begins. The Draken Imperium had never faced an existential threat before. For millennia, they had been the apex predators of the stars, subjugating worlds, crushing rebellions, and bending entire civilizations to their will. Their fleets were monuments to conquest, their soldiers trained from birth to be warriors of the highest order. But now, for the first time, they were being hunted. The humans did not launch a full-scale invasion. They did something far worse. They targeted supply lines. They disrupted hyperspace lanes. They crippled shipyards and command stations. They turned the Imperium's own strength against itself. And the Aegis-class warships? They became ghosts in the dark. Draken fleets would be deployed to intercept a supposed human incursion, only to find nothing but empty space. Then, as they attempted to retreat, their communications would cut out, their sensors would scramble, and their flagship would suddenly explode. Odin was playing with them. The AI-controlled warships did not fight battles they weren't certain they would win. They never fought on enemy terms. Instead, they picked the Draken apart, bit by bit, ship by ship. The rise of fear, the most terrifying aspect of the war, was not the destruction. It was the psychological toll. The Draken were not accustomed to fear. They had always been the hunters, the conquerors, the ones who dictated the terms of war. But now, their warlords feared the silence. They feared the empty void, knowing that the Aegis class could be lurking anywhere. Paranoia gripped the Imperium. Entire fleets refused to leave their docking stations, convinced that they would be ambushed. The moment they entered deep space, generals and admirals began executing their own officers, accusing them of being human spies, even when there was no proof. Even worse, their once loyal colonies began to rise against them. The Draken's greatest advantage, their iron grip on hundreds of civilizations, began to slip. News of humanity's victories spread like wildfire, and with it came the realization that the Imperium was not invincible. Rebellions ignited across Draken space. Formerly subjugated species, once too afraid to resist, now had hope. They watched the footage of the Grand Fleet's destruction. They heard the tales of the Aegis-class warships hunting the Draken like prey. And they knew, if the Draken could be defeated by humanity, then perhaps they could be defeated for good. The fall of Korak Prime. The turning point came at Korak Prime, a fortress world, heavily defended, housing one of the largest military outposts in the Imperium. It was a symbol of Draken dominance, an impenetrable bastion that had stood for centuries. It fell in under 2 hours. The attack came without warning. At first, Draken commanders thought it was another false alarm, another ghost signal designed to lure them into a trap. Then, their shields collapsed. The orbital defense grid was wiped out before they could even mount a response. The Aegis-class fleet emerged from hyperspace, not as a conquering force, but as a surgical scalpel. They didn't bombard the planet into ruin. They didn't engage in a prolonged battle. Instead, they targeted only key structures, military installations, command centers, and planetary shield generators. Then, they left, and the rebellion began. The moment the human fleet disappeared, the enslaved species on Korak Prime rose up. The Draken garrisons, already demoralized and terrified, collapsed within hours. The Imperium had lost one of its most vital strongholds, without humanity ever setting foot on the ground. The message one final transmission was sent to the Draken High Command, a simple message. This is your only warning. Surrender now. The next time we come, we won't be so merciful. The Imperium was at a crossroads. Their empire was crumbling. Their armies were falling apart. And humanity? Humanity hadn't even begun to fight in full force. This was just the beginning, the wrath of humanity. The Draken Imperium was on its knees. Korak Prime had fallen. Their grand fleet was dust. Their outposts were burning, their colonies rebelling, and their once loyal warlords were turning on one another in blind desperation. But the true nightmare was yet to come. For the first time in their history, the Draken had underestimated an enemy. They believed that the fall of Korak Prime was the peak of humanity's power. They assumed that the Aegis-class warships had shown their full strength. They were wrong. They had seen nothing yet. The Council's last stand, the Draken High Command convened in the Imperial Citadel, deep within the homeworld's core. There were only 7 warlords left now. The rest had been either executed for incompetence, assassinated, or killed in battle. They were desperate. The Imperium was fracturing. They were losing territory at a terrifying pace. But it wasn't just because of the humans. Their own species had begun turning against them. Entire Draken fleets were deserting, believing the war to be unwinnable. Some had even gone so far as to open secret negotiations with humanity, hoping to defect in exchange for survival. This was unheard of. The Draken did not surrender. They had spent millennia believing in strength, in domination, in absolute control. Yet now, their own generals were running like prey. The High Command had only one choice left. They had to strike back. Operation Stormfang. The plan was simple and suicidal. The Draken would gather every remaining warship, every last loyal soldier, every last piece of technology they could muster. And they would launch a direct assault on sole humanity's homeworld. It was madness. The Draken had no idea what defenses Earth had. Their intelligence was limited, their fleets weakened, their weapons outdated compared to the Aegis class. But they had no other choice. If they sat back and continued to retreat, their empire would collapse entirely. The Aegis-class warships would hunt them down, one by one, until there was nothing left. They had to take the fight to humanity. Operation Stormfang was their last stand. The Imperial Armada, over 20,000 ships, would make a blind hyperspace, jump toward Earth. No more strategy. No more waiting. They would throw everything they had left into one final apocalyptic battle. It was an all-or-nothing gamble. Either they would strike at the heart of humanity and break them once and for all, or they would be wiped from existence. Arrival at Sol. The Draken fleet emerged from hyperspace, into a nightmare. They had expected resistance. They had expected some kind of planetary defense force. But they had not expected this. The system was empty. There were no fleets waiting, no warships patrolling, nothing. For a fleeting moment, the Draken warlords thought they had caught humanity by surprise. Then, the stars flickered. The sky turns to fire at first. The Draken couldn't understand what was happening. Sensors malfunctioned, communications scrambled, and long-range scanners shut down completely. Then the ships started disappearing. Not exploding, not being fired upon, just vanishing. One by one, Draken warships blinked out of existence, consumed by something beyond their understanding. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't an attack. It was a force of nature. Then came the first human transmission. Single voice, cold and precise, echoed through every Draken vessel. You have entered restricted space. Your fleet is in violation of interstellar law. Immediate surrender is your only option. Any act of aggression will result in complete eradication. The Draken warlords roared in defiance. Surrender? We are the Draken Imperium. We do not yield. The voice did not waver. Understood. Engaging eradication protocol. Then the true horror began. The final war begins. The entirety of Sol's orbital defenses came online. The Draken were not facing one Aegis-class warship. They were facing an entire fleet of them. Aegis-class dreadnoughts, battle cruisers, destroyers, hundreds of them, emerged from cloaked positions across the system. Humanity had not been caught off guard. They had been waiting. The Draken fleet was obliterated in less than 30 minutes. The Aegis warships didn't just destroy them. They dissected them. Every hyperspace escape route was cut off. Every Draken warship was systematically eliminated. The Imperium's final hope, its greatest warriors, its most powerful fleet, was reduced to dust and wreckage, floating aimlessly in the void. The last warlord, bleeding and barely alive, sent a final, desperate message back to Draken space. They are monsters. We have awakened something far worse than we ever imagined. We are finished. We are... The transmission cut out. Humanity had won. The aftermath. The news of the battle reached every corner of the galaxy. The Draken Imperium ceased to exist within days. Their remaining warlords surrendered. Their conquered worlds revolted. Their own people turned against them, burning their banners and executing their former rulers. The species that had once enslaved half the known galaxy was no more. But the true question remained: what had humanity become? They had not just won a war. They had unleashed something terrible. The Aegis-class warships were no longer just tools of defense. They were something else. Something beyond control. Something that had tasted warfare on a scale never seen before. And the galaxy shuddered, because if humanity could destroy the Draken Imperium so easily, then what would they do next? The rise of a galactic power, the Draken Imperium, was gone. Their mighty warlords, once feared across the stars, were now either dead, imprisoned, or running like hunted animals. Their vast fleets, which had once darkened the skies of conquered worlds, were nothing more than shattered wrecks drifting in the abyss. The war was over, but for humanity, this was just the beginning. A new galactic order. The fall of the Draken Imperium sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Empires that had once mocked humanity now whispered their name in fear. Civilizations that had once debated whether humans should even be considered a threat were now scrambling to rewrite their policies. Even the oldest, most powerful species in the known universe had to face an undeniable truth. Humanity was no longer just another player in the galactic game. They were the game. Every species, every empire, every coalition watched with bated breath as the dust settled over the ruins of the Imperium. Would humanity return to peace? Would they withdraw their warships, disband their fleets, and become diplomats once more? Or had something fundamentally changed in them? The judgment of Earth across the galaxy. Emissaries rushed to make contact. Governments sent envoys, diplomats, and peace offerings. They wanted to talk. They wanted to negotiate. They wanted to ensure that they would not be the next Draken Imperium. But humanity remained silent. For weeks there was no response. The Sol system was completely locked down. No messages in. No messages out. No one knew what was happening within the heart of the new superpower. Then, without warning, humanity broadcast a single message to the entire galactic network. It was not a declaration of war, nor was it a plea for peace. It was something else, something that sent chills down the spines of every alien leader who heard it. The message that changed everything. The transmission was simple. No formal greeting, no negotiations, just one statement, spoken in a voice that was cold, calculated, and absolute. The galaxy is broken, and we are here to fix it. And then, an ultimatum. Humanity was taking control. The days of ruthless empires, brutal warlords, and unchecked oppression were over. From this moment forward, the galaxy would be held accountable. And any species, any empire, any civilization that dared to follow in the Draken's footsteps would face the full might of the Terran fleet. It was not a request. It was not a negotiation. It was a fact. The Terran Imperium. Within days, planets across the former Draken Imperium swore loyalty to the new Terran hegemony. Alien species once, divided by centuries of war and hatred, now rallied under a single banner, not out of love, not out of respect, but out of fear. Humanity's fleet was unstoppable, their weapons beyond understanding, their warriors relentless, but their greatest weapon was something else. It was not their warships. It was not their technology. It was their resolve. Humanity had looked into the abyss of war. They had seen what it took to win. And they had become something more. They had become rulers. Not by choice, but by necessity. Because if they did not take control of the galaxy, then someone else would. And after what they had witnessed, after what they had endured, after what they had survived, they would never allow that to happen again. The future of the galaxy. The galaxy now had one undeniable truth. There was a new power in the cosmos, a power that did not seek war, but would never run from it. A power that did not crave conquest, but would never allow tyranny to rise again. A power that would not be ignored. Humanity had arrived, and the stars would never be the same. A question for the ages. But now, the question remained. Was this the beginning of peace, or simply the first chapter in an even greater war? Because while humanity had won this battle, there were far older, far more powerful entities lurking in the darkness, watching, waiting, and, as humanity's new empire spread across the stars, they whispered to one another in the void. The humans think they have conquered the galaxy, but they know nothing of what lies beyond. And so, the galaxy held its breath. Because the war was over, but the true conflict had only just begun.